I'm Gabrielle, 34, a former art gallery curator whose 8-year marriage to James ended with a text message that arrived while I was at my mother's funeral. I want a divorce, it read, cold and final. While he cleared our accounts and moved another woman into our home, I simply replied, okay. My background in art appraisal taught me to recognize true value. Sometimes the most powerful response is the quietest one. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength when life falls apart. I promise what comes next will surprise you. I met James at a charity auction in Boston 11 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of graduate school, with an art history degree, working my first real job coordinating donors for the museum's annual fundraiser. He was 30 already, an established corporate lawyer there, representing his firm, which was a major sponsor. Our eyes met across the room while I was arranging a display of donated paintings. He approached with confidence, champagne flute in hand, and asked questions about the artwork that showed genuine interest rather than the usual small talk. By the end of the night, we had discussed Rothko's color fields, debated the merits of contemporary installations, and exchanged phone numbers. Our romance was swift and intoxicating. James was everything I thought I wanted: intelligent, ambitious, well-read, and he seemed to value my passion for art. Within 6 months, we were living together in my small Boston apartment. At the 1-year mark, he proposed during a weekend trip to New York after taking me to MoMA and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "You bring beauty into my logical world," he said as he knelt before me in Central Park. "I want to build a life where we balance each other." I believed him completely. 2 years into our marriage, James received an offer from a prestigious Chicago law firm. The move would mean a significant promotion for him and potential partnership track. For me, it meant leaving my position at the museum, where I had just been promoted to assistant curator. "It's just a stepping stone," he assured me. "Once we're settled, you'll find an even better position in Chicago. Their art scene is incredible." I agreed to the move, believing in our partnership. I trusted that my career sacrifice would be temporary, an investment in our shared future. Within months of arriving in Chicago, I secured a position at a small contemporary gallery. The pay was less, the prestige diminished, but I told myself it was temporary. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother had grown increasingly strained. She had always been critical of my choices, from my career in art to my rapid marriage to James. "You're giving up too much of yourself," she warned during one of our monthly phone calls. A marriage is a partnership, not a merger where one person disappears. I dismissed her concerns as old-fashioned thinking from a woman who had been divorced twice. What did she know about modern relationships? Besides, James supported my career in theory, even if in practice his needs always seemed to take precedence. The first warning signs appeared during our 3rd year in Chicago. James began working later, his phone constantly buzzing with urgent messages from the office. Weekend brunches with friends were interrupted by calls he had to take in private. When I questioned the increasing distance between us, he blamed the pressure of trying to make partner. "This is for us, Gabby," he would say, using the nickname I had repeatedly asked him not to use. "Just a few more years of this pace, then we can focus on starting a family and traveling like we planned." I believed him because I needed to. I had invested too much, given up too much to consider alternatives. Then my mother called with the news: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was bleak, 6 months at most. Despite our differences, I knew I needed to be there. When I told James, his response was supportive but detached. "Of course you should go," he said without looking up from his laptop. "Let me know what the doctors say. I'll try to join you when things calm down at work." I flew to Boston the next day. My mother had deteriorated quickly, her once vibrant presence diminished by pain and medication. During those first few days, I called James each evening, giving updates and seeking comfort. His responses grew shorter, his questions fewer. By the 2nd week, he had stopped asking about her condition entirely. "The Morrison case is in its critical phase," he explained. I just don't have the bandwidth right now. I stayed by my mother's side for 6 weeks watching her fade. James never found the time to visit, always another case, another emergency, another reason why this week wouldn't work. In her lucid moments, my mother would ask about him. "Is James coming?" she would ask, and I would make another excuse. During one of her last coherent conversations, she held my hand tightly and said, "You deserve someone who shows up, Gabrielle. Remember that." She died on a Tuesday morning in early April. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand as she took her final breaths. Alone. I called James immediately, my voice breaking, as I told him she was gone. "I'm so sorry, Gabby," he said, and for once, I thought I heard genuine emotion in his voice. "The service is on Friday. I'll book a flight tonight." Thursday morning, as I was finalizing arrangements with the funeral director, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "I want a divorce. I've consulted an attorney. We'll have papers sent. Sorry about your mom." I stared at the screen, the words blurring, as my mind tried to process this final betrayal. 8 years of marriage ended in a text message while I planned my mother's funeral. The cruelty was so absolute, it circled back to absurdity. I typed the only response that felt right in that moment, "Okay." Then I turned my phone off, finished the funeral arrangements, and allowed myself precisely 30 minutes to break down in my rental car before pulling myself together. As I wiped away tears, a strange calm settled over me. James expected hysteria, pleading a barrage of questions and accusations. My simple "okay" would confuse him, maybe even anger him. Good. Let him wonder. Let him wait. In that moment, I realized time was my only advantage, and I would use it carefully. After burying my mother beneath the Massachusetts maple trees she had loved, I returned to Chicago. The 5-hour flight gave me time to prepare for what awaited me, but reality still hit hard when I opened the door to our brownstone. The house felt different immediately. Emptier, though at first glance, nothing obvious was missing. I moved through each room, methodically cataloging changes. His closet was half-empty, suits and shoes missing. His office desk cleared of personal items. Our bedroom felt stripped not just of his presence, but of something more. I reached for my jewelry box, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Opening it confirmed my suspicions. The diamond earrings he'd given me for our 5th anniversary were gone, along with my grandmother's sapphire necklace. Convenient that he knew which pieces were most valuable, I muttered to myself. My next stop was our home computer. I logged into our joint bank accounts, my breath catching as I saw the balances. Our savings account, which had held over $120,000 the last time I checked, now showed just $1,200. The checking account, normally maintaining a $10,000 balance, had exactly $100 remaining. Both had been drained 3 days prior while I was arranging my mother's funeral. I leaned back in the chair, surprisingly calm. This level of calculation revealed planning, weeks or months of it. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was a campaign. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Marion, our elderly neighbor, who had watered my houseplants during my absence. "Gabrielle, dear, I'm so sorry about your mother," she said, pulling me into a fragrant hug that smelled of gardenia perfume. "And I've been meaning to tell you, I think there was some confusion while you were away." "Confusion?" I asked, inviting her in. Marion settled onto our sofa, looking uncomfortable. "Well, I noticed a young woman coming and going from your house. At first, I thought perhaps she was a relative helping James while you were away, but then I saw them. Well, they seemed rather intimate." She patted my hand. "I didn't want to bother you while you were dealing with your mother, but I thought you should know." I thanked Marion for her kindness and honesty, assuring her I would handle the situation. After she left, I returned to the computer with renewed purpose. If James had been this calculated about our finances, there would be evidence elsewhere. Our home email account revealed nothing unusual, but then I remembered his work email sometimes synced to our home computer when he used it on weekends. I searched the cached files and found a folder of emails between James and someone named Natalie. Natalie Winters, his paralegal. 26 years old, according to the firm's website. The emails started professionally 18 months ago, then gradually shifted. Lunch meetings became dinners. Work discussions became personal exchanges. 6 months ago, they crossed into explicit territory. Miss you already. Can't wait for Boston next week. G will be with her mother. We'll have the hotel room all weekend. Read one from James dated just before my mother's condition worsened. They had been in Boston together less than 5 miles from the hospital where I sat holding my dying mother's hand. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Further digging revealed more. An application for a new credit card in James's name only opened 8 months ago. Airline tickets for 2 to Bermuda purchased 6 weeks ago for a trip scheduled next month. A lease agreement for an apartment in the Gold Coast district signed 3 months ago. The thoroughness of his betrayal was almost impressive. While I had been supporting his career, nurturing our marriage, and then caring for my dying mother, he had been systematically preparing his exit. I downloaded and saved everything I found, creating backup copies on a USB drive. Then I began calling our mutual friends ostensibly to inform them I was back in town. Their reactions told another story. Awkwardness, surprise that I was calling vague references to hearing about changes. "We just assumed you knew," said Amanda, once my close friend. "James has been saying for months that things weren't working, that you two had grown apart. He mentioned you were planning to stay in Boston after your mother. You know." The lies were so comprehensive, they had constructed an entire alternate reality where our divorce was mutually expected, even initiated by me. I thanked Amanda politely and ended the call, adding her name to my mental list of people who had accepted James's narrative without question. That night alone in what had been our bed reality finally caught up with me. The armor of shock and determination cracked, and I broke down completely. I sobbed until my throat was raw. My body curled around a pillow that still smelled faintly of his cologne. I allowed myself that one night of weakness. In the morning, I woke with swollen eyes but clear purpose. I made 3 calls, first to a locksmith to change the house locks, then to my bank to open a new personal account, and finally to the top-rated divorce attorney in Chicago. If James wanted war, I would give him one, but I would fight it my way. Methodical, strategic, and completely unexpected. The art world had taught me patience and perception. I could see the full picture now, and I began to plan my careful restoration. Back in our home office, I set up a hidden camera disguised as a desk ornament. In the living room, I positioned a voice-activated recorder inside a decorative book. Throughout the house, I documented everything with photographs. The half-empty closets, the missing valuables, the depleted accounts. When James inevitably returned for more of his belongings, I would be ready. I had no intention of confronting him directly, not yet. Knowledge was power, and right now he believed he had all of it. What he didn't know was that I had begun gathering my own. 2 days after my return to Chicago, James texted asking to meet to discuss the transition civilly. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory. I arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table with a clear view of the entrance, and ordered a cappuccino I had no intention of drinking. He walked in exactly on time, looking exactly as he always did. Tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, subtly patterned tie. The familiar sight of him sent an unexpected pang through my chest. For a moment, I saw the man I had loved before. The image was replaced by the reality of who he had become. "Gabrielle," he said, taking the seat across from me. His expression was a carefully constructed mask of professional sympathy. "I appreciate you meeting me. How are you holding up?" The funeral went okay. The casual mention of my mother's funeral, as if it were a social event, rather than the most painful day of my life, confirmed everything I needed to know about the man sitting across from me. "The funeral was lovely," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for asking." His eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for signs of distress, anger, anything that would confirm his expectations. Finding none, he shifted uncomfortably. "I've been staying at a hotel." He said a lie I chose not to correct. "I'll be by the house tomorrow to pick up more of my things if that's all right. I've hired movers for the larger furniture items we discussed." We had discussed nothing, of course, but I nodded as if this were all perfectly normal. "I think it's best if we handle this amicably," he continued, clearly emboldened by my apparent cooperation. "I've had my attorney draft a fair settlement agreement. It's straightforward. You keep the house until it sells, we split the proceeds. I've already divided our accounts equitably." I almost smiled at the audacity. "I've retained counsel," I said simply. "You can forward all paperwork to Rachel Goldstein. I have her card here." I slid the business card across the table. James's expression flickered with surprise, then quickly reset. "That's unnecessary at this stage, Gabby. We can work this out between ourselves before getting lawyers too involved. It'll save us both money and stress." "I prefer to have representation from the beginning," I replied. "And please call me Gabrielle." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, I know this is difficult. I never wanted to hurt you, but sometimes relationships run their course. We want different things. You've been so focused on your mother these past months, and I've been building my career. We've grown apart. It happens." The practiced speech, probably rehearsed with Natalie, washed over me without effect. 8 years reduced to, "It happens." I maintained my neutral expression, which seemed to frustrate him more than tears would have. "Is there someone else?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He hesitated, then nodded solemnly. "Yes. I didn't plan it, but yes. I've met someone who understands the demands of my career, who shares my goals. I think you deserve to know the truth." "I appreciate that," I said, taking a small sip of my cappuccino. "I should go. Please have your attorney contact Rachel." I stood to leave, and James reached for my hand, seemingly thrown by my composure. "Gabrielle, are you okay? I expected... Well, this isn't the reaction I anticipated." I looked down at his hand on mine and gently removed it. "What reaction would make this easier for you, James? Would you prefer tears? Accusations? Would that help you feel justified?" He had no answer. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, maintaining my composure until I reached my car. Only then did I allow myself a moment of bitter satisfaction. James had expected drama hysteria, a scene that would confirm his narrative of our failing marriage. My calm had denied him that comfort. The next morning, I met with Rachel Goldstein in her downtown office. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So he drained your accounts, took your valuables, and has been preparing this exit for months," she summarized after I presented my evidence. "And he's been lying to your social circle." Classic scorched earth approach. "He's counting on you being too emotional and devastated to fight effectively." "He doesn't know me as well as he thinks he does," I replied. Rachel smiled for the first time. "I think I'm going to enjoy working with you, Gabrielle. Now let's talk strategy. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. That means the court divides marital assets equitably, not necessarily equally. His behavior will absolutely factor into what's considered equitable." She explained that as a spouse, I was entitled to a portion of everything acquired during our marriage, including his pending partnership if we could prove it was in process before the divorce filing. "The partnership is worth far more than our current assets," I told her. "That's why he's rushing this. If he can finalize the divorce before the partnership is announced, he thinks he can keep it separate." "Smart observation." Rachel nodded. "We'll need to document the timeline of his partnership track. Do you have any connections at the firm?" I thought about it. Not directly, but my college roommate Andrea works in marketing for a client of theirs. She might have contacts. Perfect. Reach out carefully. In the meantime, we need to document everything. The accounts he drained the property he removed his living arrangements with this Natalie person. Illinois isn't a fault state, so the affair won't directly impact the division of assets, but his financial misconduct absolutely will. We developed a comprehensive plan. I would maintain the appearance of someone shell-shocked, but not contesting the divorce buying time while we built our case. Rachel would delay proceedings with legitimate procedural requests while we gathered evidence about the partnership and hidden assets. After meeting with Rachel, I reconnected with Andrea over lunch, carefully explaining enough of my situation to enlist her help without revealing our strategy. James is leaving me for his paralegal, I said, allowing my voice to break slightly. I'm trying to understand what's happening with his career since everything in our life seems to have been a lie. Andrea's network proved invaluable. Within days, I learned that James was indeed on the partnership track with an announcement expected within 2 months. The partnership buy-in was substantial, but the expected annual compensation would more than triple his current salary. Meanwhile, I maintained my facade at home. When James came to collect more belongings, I made myself scarce, leaving only a note about which items he could take. My hidden cameras captured him searching through my personal files and photographing documents, evidence Rachel added to our growing file. His texts grew increasingly demanding as I continued to deflect direct confrontation. We need to meet about the house. My attorney hasn't heard from yours. Why aren't you responding to the settlement offer? I replied minimally, always deferring to my attorney or claiming emotional overwhelm. Each deflection bought more time, and time was exactly what we needed. In therapy, another step Rachel had recommended both for my well-being and our case, I began processing not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of my mother. The two griefs intertwined, creating a complex tapestry of loss that I worked through session by session. You're handling this with remarkable composure, my therapist observed during one session. I'm channeling my mother, I replied with a small smile. She always said, never let them see you sweat. I thought it was terrible advice until now. The facade wasn't without cost. At night alone in our house, the weight of betrayal would sometimes crash over me. I would find myself standing in rooms filled with memories, questioning every moment of our marriage. Had any of it been real? Had he ever loved me? The questions had no answers, but asking them was part of my healing. During this time, I received a text from an unknown number. He never loved you. He told me everything. You were just convenient until he met me. Back off and let him go, or things will get ugly. Natalie had entered the game. I forwarded the message to Rachel without responding, another piece of evidence in our growing file. The threats continued sporadically, each more desperate than the last, suggesting James wasn't finding our divorce as simple as he had anticipated. Through Andrea's connections, I learned that James had been bragging about his upcoming partnership at the firm, already spending money he didn't yet have. He had put a deposit on a lakefront condo and ordered a custom Audi. His overconfidence was becoming a liability, exactly as Rachel had predicted. Men like James always think they're the smartest person in the room, she told me during our weekly update. They can't imagine being outmaneuvered, especially by someone they've underestimated. Keep playing the long game. We're almost ready. I continued building strength in silence, preparing for the moment when I would finally reveal my hand. As James grew increasingly frustrated with my apparent passivity, I grew increasingly confident in my strategy. The art of patience I was discovering was its own form of power. 2 months after James's text message ended our marriage, the turning point arrived with unexpected speed. I had been maintaining my strategy of minimal engagement, watching from a distance as James grew increasingly confident and careless. His partnership announcement was imminent, and his patience with our amicable divorce was wearing thin. One Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find James standing there, clearly agitated.
This has gone on long enough, he said, pushing past me into the foyer. Your attorney keeps delaying. I have a life to get on with.
I closed the door calmly, acutely aware of the voice recorder activated by his arrival.
Rachel is being thorough. That's her job. It's been 2 months, Gabrielle. You're being unreasonable.
He paced our living room, the room where we had once hosted dinner parties and spent quiet evenings reading together.
The settlement offer is more than fair.
Is it? I asked, maintaining my composure. You took everything from our accounts. You removed valuables from our home. You've been living with Natalie in an apartment you secured months ago. What exactly is fair about your offer? His expression darkened.
I took what was mine. Half of our marital assets were mine, James. We both know that. Prove it.
He snapped, his mask of civility slipping.
You have no idea what I've done with our money. You never paid attention to our finances. You were too busy with your little art projects and your dying mother.
The cruelty of his words hung in the air between us. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably.
Look,
he finally said, voice softening artificially.
I'm trying to be reasonable. Take the settlement. Keep the house until it sells. Start fresh. Fighting me will only drain whatever resources you have left on legal fees.
Is that what you told your other girlfriends? I asked quietly. He froze.
What are you talking about?
Natalie isn't the first, is she? There was Rebecca from accounting last year, and someone in Boston during that conference, the Heathrow Hotel Room 412. Does that sound familiar? The color drained from his face.
You're making things up.
Am I? That would be convenient for you. I moved toward the kitchen, putting distance between us. I have a therapy appointment in 30 minutes. I need to get ready.
This isn't over, he warned, following me. You're not going to get anything more than what I've offered. I've made sure of that.
Have you? How exactly? Something in my tone must have unnerved him. He studied my face, suddenly uncertain.
You're just delaying the inevitable, Gabrielle. Sign the papers and move on.
I'll consider your advice, I said, opening the front door in clear dismissal.
Please call before you come by next time.
After he left, I downloaded the recording and sent it to Rachel. His admission about taking what was mine, and his threat about making sure I wouldn't get anything more, were exactly the kind of evidence we needed. 2 days later, the law firm announced its new partners. James's name was among them, his promotion celebrated with a cocktail reception at the Chicago Club. I wasn't invited, of course, but Andrea secured me an invitation as her +1 through her client connections. I debated the wisdom of attending. Rachel advised against direct confrontation, but acknowledged the strategic value of reminding the firm's leadership of my existence before the divorce proceedings intensified. In the end, I decided to make a brief, dignified appearance. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. My mother's pearl earrings, ones James hadn't deemed valuable enough to take, completed the look. I entered the reception with Andrea accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and scanning the room. I spotted James immediately holding court with senior partners Natalie at his side, in a red dress that seemed inappropriately flashy for the setting. They were laughing, celebrating completely at ease. The sight of them together sent a jolt through me, but I channeled it into resolve rather than pain. James saw me a moment later. The shock on his face was worth any discomfort my presence might cause. He excused himself from his group and made his way toward me, Natalie trailing behind with a confused expression.
"What are you doing here?"
he hissed when he reached us.
"Congratulating you on your partnership,"
I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear.
"It's quite an achievement." "You need to leave,"
he said under his breath.
"You weren't invited."
"Actually, I gestured to Andrea. You remember my friend Andrea Thompson? She works with Meridian Financial."
The mention of a major client made James pause. He forced a tight smile. Of course. Nice to see you, Andrea. If you'll excuse us, I need a private word with my wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, Natalie corrected, stepping forward with a challenging stare. You must be Gabrielle. I've heard so much about you. I regarded her with genuine curiosity. She was younger than me, yes, but not remarkably beautiful or striking. What had drawn James to her? Was it simply her availability? Her willingness to participate in his deception? I can't say the same about you, I replied evenly. Though I did enjoy your text messages. Very creative threats. Natalie's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Perhaps we should ask the managing partners if they recognize the phone number. I turned to James. Congratulations again on the partnership. I'm sure it will be quite lucrative. I moved away before either could respond, circulating through the room with Andrea. We stayed just long enough to be seen by the firm's leadership accepting introductions and making polite conversation. Through it all, I could feel James watching me, his expression a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Mission accomplished, we left. In the taxi afterward, Andrea squeezed my hand. You were magnificent. Did you see his face when you walked in priceless? It's not about revenge, I told her, though part of me had certainly enjoyed his discomfort. It's about standing my ground. The next day, I received a call from an unexpected source, James's mother, Eleanor. Gabrielle, dear, I hope I'm not overstepping, she began hesitantly. James told us about the divorce, but his explanation seemed incomplete. And then Cynthia Burton mentioned seeing you at the partnership reception. I just wanted to check that you're all right. Eleanor and I had always had a cordial, if somewhat distant, relationship. Unlike my own mother, she had never offered unsolicited advice or criticism. Her call now, reaching across the divide James had created, touched me deeply. I'm managing Eleanor, I said truthfully. It's been a difficult few months with my mother's passing and everything else. I was so sorry to hear about your mother, she said with genuine sympathy. James mentioned it was very sudden. Another lie. I chose not to correct it. Thank you. How are you and Robert doing? We're concerned, to be honest. James has been different. The young woman he's with now, she's not. She trailed off. I'm sorry this isn't appropriate. It's all right, I assured her. I appreciate your call. There's one other thing, she added before we ended the conversation. The locket that belonged to your grandmother. James told us he gave it to you for safekeeping, but if you don't have it, we'd like to know. It's been in the family for generations. My blood ran cold. The locket she described had been among the items missing from my jewelry box. I'll look for it, Eleanor. Thank you for letting me know. After we hung up, I added this new information to my growing file. James had not only taken my inheritance, but was apparently stealing from his own family as well. That weekend, seeking solace and distance, I drove to my mother's house in Boston. The property was now mine, still filled with her belongings, awaiting my decisions about what to keep, sell, or donate. I walked through the rooms, running my fingers over familiar objects, breathing in the fading scent of her presence. In her bedroom closet, I found a box labeled simply, "For Gabrielle." Inside was a letter in her handwriting, along with financial documents I had never seen before. My darling daughter, the letter began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. There are things I never told you, partly out of pride and partly to protect you. Your father left more than just emotional scars when he abandoned us. He left substantial debts that I've spent my life repaying. But I didn't want that burden for you. She went on to explain that her seemingly modest lifestyle had been by design. For years, she had been quietly investing in art, using her knowledge from her years working in galleries before I was born. The documents in the box detailed her collection and its approximate value, over $2 million.
I never wanted you to stay in a situation out of financial necessity the way I did for too long with your father. Her letter continued. This is your safety net, your freedom. Use it wisely. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. Even in death, my mother was protecting me, offering me the independence she had fought so hard to achieve for herself. That night alone in my childhood bedroom, I allowed myself to truly feel everything I had been controlling since James's text. I cried for my mother, for the marriage I had believed in, for the years spent supporting a man who had calculated his exit with such precision. I cried until there were no tears left, until the grief transformed into something else entirely: determination. In the morning, I called Rachel from my mother's kitchen. I'm ready, I told her. It's time to show our hand. Armed with new evidence and renewed resolve, I returned to Chicago, ready to execute the counterattack Rachel and I had carefully crafted. The discovery of my mother's hidden assets had transformed my position. Financial security gave me options and leverage I hadn't possessed before. Within days of my return, Rachel filed amended divorce proceedings that detailed James's financial misconduct, including evidence of the drained accounts, removed valuables, and hidden apartment. Most crucially, we included documentation of his partnership track, establishing that it had been in process long before our separation. James's response was immediate and furious. He called repeatedly, left voicemails alternating between threats and attempts at reconciliation, and finally sent an email demanding a meeting. You have no idea what you're doing, he wrote. This approach will only hurt us both. Rachel advised against meeting him alone, so we arranged a conference at her office. James arrived with his attorney, Harold Bentley, a silver-haired man with an expression of perpetual disdain. This is unnecessary escalation. Bentley began placing a folder on the conference table. My client has been more than generous in his settlement offers. These amended filings are simply vindictive. Rachel smiled pleasantly. Vindictive would be pressing criminal charges for financial fraud, Mr. Bentley. We're simply ensuring equitable distribution of marital assets, including Mr. Patterson's new partnership compensation. James leaned forward. That partnership has nothing to do with our marriage. It was secured after we separated. Was it? Rachel opened her laptop. We have documentation showing your partnership track began 18 months ago, including testimony from firm employees about your candidacy discussions. The partnership was a direct result of work performed during your marriage work that Mrs. Patterson supported by relocating to Chicago and managing your household. That's a stretch, Bentley scoffed. The courts rarely see it that way, Rachel countered. But if you'd prefer to argue this before a judge, we're prepared to do so. We also have evidence of Mr. Patterson's removal of personal property, including family heirlooms belonging to his own parents. James's face paled. What are you talking about? I spoke for the first time. Your mother called me about your grandmother's locket, the one you took from my jewelry box. She believes you're holding it for safekeeping. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, but the flash of panic in his eyes confirmed my suspicion. We also have recordings, Rachel continued, of Mr. Patterson admitting to hiding assets and threatening Mrs. Patterson. Would you like to hear them? Without waiting for a response, she played the audio from James's visit to our house. His voice filled the room. You have no idea what I've done with our money. You never paid attention to our finances. Bentley shifted uncomfortably. That proves nothing. Perhaps not definitively, Rachel agreed. But combined with the bank records showing systematic withdrawal of funds prior to separation, the undisclosed apartment lease, and Mr. Patterson's documented pattern of deception, it creates a compelling narrative for the court. She turned to James directly. Additionally, we've submitted a motion for forensic accounting of all accounts under your control for the past 24 months. Given the evidence of financial misconduct, the judge is likely to grant it. The mention of forensic accounting visibly unsettled James. I watched as he whispered urgently to Bentley, who frowned and shook his head.
We came here in good faith to negotiate, Bentley said, gathering his papers. If you insist on this aggressive approach, we'll respond in kind. Before you go, Rachel said, you should know we've also documented the harassment Mrs. Patterson has received from Ms. Winters. The threatening texts have been submitted as evidence of continued emotional abuse during the separation period. James stood abruptly. This is a fishing expedition. You have nothing substantial. Then you have nothing to worry about, I said quietly. Unless there's something you're hiding. The mediation ended with no resolution, but it had served its purpose. James now understood that I was neither ignorant nor passive. His attorney had seen enough evidence to recognize that their position was weaker than they had assumed. As predicted, the judge granted our motion for forensic accounting. The preliminary results revealed exactly what we suspected. James had been siphoning money into private accounts for over a year, preparing financially for his exit long before he sent that text. More surprisingly, the accounting uncovered gambling debts James had been hiding. Despite his substantial salary, he had accumulated nearly $100,000 in losses at various online poker sites. This discovery explained his desperate need for the partnership income and his rush to finalize our divorce before these financial issues came to light. With each revelation, James's position weakened. His attorney began sending increasingly reasonable settlement offers, a clear sign they were concerned about what a court might decide. Meanwhile, Natalie's harassment escalated, then suddenly stopped. Through Andrea's network, I learned why she was pregnant. The timing suggested the child had been conceived around the time James sent his divorce text. This new complication likely explained his urgency to resolve our divorce. I felt a strange mix of emotions at this news. Not jealousy or anger, but a profound sadness for the child who would be born into such a compromised foundation. I thought of my own mother's warnings about James, wondering if I had truly known him at all. During a particularly difficult therapy session, I confessed my darkest thoughts. Part of me wants to destroy him completely, I admitted. Take everything, expose him to his firm, make sure everyone knows exactly who he is. Is that wrong? My therapist considered this thoughtfully. Revenge might feel satisfying momentarily, but it rarely brings peace. The question is, what outcome would actually help you heal and move forward? Her question stayed with me as we approached the final phase of negotiations. I had the power now to significantly damage James's career and reputation. The evidence of financial misconduct, if made public, would raise serious questions about his fitness for partnership. The gambling debts alone could trigger an ethics review by the Bar Association. But wielding that power would require continuing to engage with him to remain connected through conflict. Was that what I wanted? One evening, as I was considering this question, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find James's parents, Eleanor and Robert, standing on my porch. "We hope we're not intruding," Eleanor said hesitantly. "We wanted to speak with you in person." I invited them in, offering tea, which they gratefully accepted. We sat in the living room, the awkwardness palpable until Robert cleared his throat. "James told us about the pregnancy," he said directly, "and about the financial issues that have come to light. We wanted you to know that we had no idea about any of this." "We raised him better than this," Eleanor added, her voice breaking slightly. "The way he's treated you after everything you've done for him. We're deeply ashamed." Their sincerity touched me. They were victims of James's deception too, in their own way. "It's not your fault," I assured them. "James made his choices." "We also wanted to tell you," Robert continued, "that we've spoken to him about the family heirlooms. He's returning them to us, and we want to make sure anything that was meant for you comes back to you." We talked for over an hour. They shared stories of James as a child, always ambitious, always needing to win. They asked about my plans, offering support without intrusion. When they left, Eleanor hugged me tightly. "You deserved better from our son," she whispered. "Never doubt that." Their visit clarified something important for me. This wasn't just about James anymore, or even about justice in the abstract. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be moving forward, what values I wanted to preserve. The next day, I called Rachel and outlined my decision. We would push for a fair financial settlement that accounted for James's misconduct, but we would not pursue public exposure of his gambling or other private issues unless absolutely necessary to secure equitable distribution. "Are you sure?" Rachel asked. "We have leverage to demand much more." "I'm sure," I replied. "I want this resolved so I can move on, not so he can suffer indefinitely." Rachel respected my decision, though I could tell she would have enjoyed taking James to task more thoroughly. We drafted a settlement proposal that required James to 1. Return all removed valuables or provide compensation for their appraised value. 2. Restore half of all marital assets he had withdrawn plus interest. 3. Provide a percentage of his partnership compensation for the next 3 years, acknowledging it as a marital asset. 4. Assume responsibility for the majority of legal fees. 5. Relinquish any claim to my mother's estate or property. The proposal was firm, but not punitive. It sought justice without vengeance, closure without cruelty. James's response came through his attorney 3 days later. He accepted the terms with minor modifications. After months of conflict and calculation, the resolution was almost anticlimactic. We finalized the settlement without ever appearing in court. The last step was signing the documents that would legally end our 8-year marriage. We met at Rachel's office, the 4 of us, James, Bentley, Rachel, and myself, sitting around the conference table with stacks of papers between us. As James signed his name on the final page, he looked up at me. "I never wanted it to be like this," he said quietly. "Neither did I replied. "But we're here now." Once the documents were complete, Rachel and Bentley stepped out to make copies, leaving James and me alone for the first time since that coffee shop meeting months ago. "Natalie's having a boy," he said after a moment of silence. "Due in November." I nodded, unsure why he was sharing this. "Congratulations." "My parents told me they visited you," he continued. "They've always thought highly of you." "They're good people." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it sent an unexpected pang through me. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen, Gabrielle. Not the way it did." "You planned enough of it," I said, not unkindly. "The apartment, the accounts, the partnership timing. You calculated your exit down to the dollar." He didn't deny it. "I got caught up in something I couldn't control. The gambling, then Natalie, then the lies to cover everything. It snowballed." That's the thing about lies, James. They require more lies to sustain them. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the timing with your mother. That was inexcusable. I studied his face, searching for the man I had once loved enough to marry. He looked older, tired, the confidence that had once attracted me, now eroded by the consequences of his choices. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said finally. "And I hope you're a better father than you were a husband." Rachel returned with the signed copies, ending our conversation. James left without further comment, walking out of my life as deliberately as he had once walked in. As I gathered my things to leave, Rachel touched my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I considered the question seriously. "Not yet," I answered honestly. "But I will be." Outside, the Chicago spring was in full bloom, the air warm with promise. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the past months begin to lift. The marriage was over. The battle was won. Now came the most important part, building something new from what remained. I called the realtor I had selected to list our house, confirming our appointment for the following week. Then I walked to the lake, watching the sunlight dance across the water, feeling for the first time in months that my future belonged truly to me. 1 year after signing the divorce papers, I stood in the center of my gallery on opening night, watching as Chicago's art community circulated through the space. Gabrielle Patterson Fine Arts had been open for 6 months, specializing in works by emerging female artists. The current exhibition, Reclamation, featured pieces exploring themes of identity and rebirth. The journey to this moment had been neither straightforward nor easy. After finalizing the divorce, I had sold the Chicago house, a process that stirred complicated emotions as I packed away the remnants of my married life. Each room held memories, some worth preserving, others better left behind. I cataloged everything meticulously, a final act of curatorial care for a collection that had once defined me. The proceeds from the house sale, combined with my settlement and my mother's unexpected inheritance, provided the capital to start fresh. I considered returning to Boston, but ultimately decided to remain in Chicago. This city had witnessed my unraveling. It would also witness my reconstruction. I found a spacious loft in the West Loop, an industrial space with exposed brick and towering windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. The renovation became a form of therapy, each decision, from paint colors to furniture placement, an exercise in rediscovering my own taste, my own voice. During this time, my professional reinvention took shape as well. Rather than seeking another position in an established gallery, I decided to create something of my own. The art world had changed during my years supporting James's career. Online platforms had democratized access, allowing collectors to discover artists outside traditional channels. I saw an opportunity to create a hybrid model, a physical gallery with a strong digital presence focusing on artists who had been historically underrepresented. The learning curve was steep. I consulted with attorneys about business structures, met with bankers about commercial loans, and negotiated lease terms for a storefront in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Each step required knowledge I didn't yet possess. But unlike in my marriage this time, the gaps in my understanding weren't vulnerabilities to be exploited. They were challenges to be met. My former colleagues, once distant after accepting James's narrative about our separation, gradually reconnected as the truth became known. Some offered genuine apologies. Others simply resumed contact as if nothing had happened. I welcomed those who acknowledged their mistake while maintaining healthy boundaries with those who didn't. Andrea remained my steadfast supporter, helping me navigate Chicago's business community and introducing me to potential investors and artists. "You've become a different person," she observed over dinner one evening. "Stronger, more certain." "Not different," I corrected her. "More myself." The gallery opened with a focused mission and a carefully curated inaugural exhibition. The response exceeded my expectations, with sales strong enough to cover operating costs from the first month. Art critics noted the distinctive perspective I brought, highlighting artists whose work might have been overlooked by more established institutions. On a personal level, healing came in waves rather than a steady progression. Some days brought unexpected moments of grief. For my mother, for the marriage I thought I had, for the years spent suppressing my own ambitions. Other days brought exhilarating freedom, the joy of making decisions without compromise or consideration of someone else's priorities. I continued therapy, gradually reducing the frequency of sessions as I developed my own tools for processing emotion and setting boundaries. My therapist had been right. Revenge would have kept me tethered to James, whereas focusing on my own rebuilding had allowed me to truly move forward. News about James came through occasional updates from mutual acquaintances or his parents, with whom I maintained a cordial relationship. His son had been born, Alexander James Patterson. The partnership was proving lucrative but demanding. His relationship with Natalie had stabilized into something resembling commitment, though they hadn't married. None of this information stirred the pain I had once anticipated. Instead, I felt a detached compassion for the complicated life he had created for himself. The gambling, as far as I knew, remained an issue managed rather than resolved. 6 months after opening the gallery, I met Thomas Kelly at a city planning commission meeting where I was advocating for Arts District designation in our neighborhood. He was an architect, working on sustainable urban housing, thoughtful and quietly confident in a way that contrasted sharply with James's performative self-assurance. Our conversation continued over coffee after the meeting, then dinner the following week. Thomas asked questions and genuinely listened to the answers. He shared stories of his own divorce years earlier and the perspective it had given him on relationships. "Trust is earned incrementally," he said during our third dinner together. "There's no rush." His patience was refreshing. We began spending more time together, visiting exhibitions, attending lectures, exploring Chicago neighborhoods I had never properly experienced during my marriage. Thomas introduced me to his teenage daughters who lived primarily with their mother, but stayed with him every other weekend. I watched how he parented with attention and respect, never using his children as extensions of his ego. The contrast with James was instructive. Where James had demanded admiration, Thomas offered appreciation. Where James had seen my independence as threatening, Thomas celebrated it. The difference wasn't just in the men themselves, but in who I had become. Someone who recognized these distinctions and valued them appropriately. Now at the gallery opening, Thomas stood across the room deep in conversation with one of the artists. He caught my eye and smiled, a simple gesture of support without possession. I returned the smile, feeling a quiet contentment that required no audience or validation. My reverie was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Gabrielle!" I turned to find James standing before me, looking both out of place and determined. He wore an expensive suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, suggesting recent weight loss. "James," I acknowledged, surprised but composed. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I saw the write-up in the Tribune," he explained. "Impressive coverage for a new gallery." "Thank you. How's Alexander?" A genuine smile crossed his face. "Growing fast. 7 months old now." He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of a chubby-cheeked baby with his eyes. "Natalie's back at work. Motherhood was more challenging than she expected." I nodded, unsure what response he sought. "Congratulations on the gallery," he continued awkwardly. "It's really something." "It is," I agreed. "Was there something specific you wanted, James?" He hesitated, glancing around at the crowded space. "I wanted to see for myself. When we were together, you talked about doing something like this someday. I didn't think you were serious." The casual dismissal, so characteristic of how he had viewed my ambitions during our marriage, might once have wounded me. Now, it simply confirmed how little he had actually known me. "I've always been serious about art," I replied. "You just weren't listening." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Fair enough. I should go. I just wanted to say, you're doing well. Better than I expected." "Better than you planned for," I corrected him quietly. James held my gaze for a moment, then nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth of my words. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my gallery, out of my life, for what I suspected would be the final time. I watched him go, feeling neither triumph nor regret. His appearance had confirmed something important: the power he once held over me, emotionally, financially, psychologically, was gone completely. The text that had once devastated me now seemed merely a mile marker on a journey that had ultimately led me home to myself. Thomas approached as James disappeared through the door. "Everything okay?" That looked intense. "That was my ex-husband," I explained, making a surprise appearance. "Are you all right?" His concern was genuine, but not overprotective. I smiled, linking my arm through his. "Perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually." I looked around at the gallery, at the art on the walls, at the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal. "Let me introduce you to Monica, the artist who created that installation you were admiring." As we crossed the room together, I reflected on the strange gift James had unknowingly given me when he ended our marriage with that cold text message. In trying to diminish me, he had instead set me free. My simple okay response had been the first step toward reclaiming my power, my first act of self-determination after years of compromise. The gallery buzzing with conversation and appreciation around me was the manifestation of that power. Not power over others, but the deeper power of authenticity and purpose. The journey from that text message to this moment had not been easy, but it had been necessary, transforming me from someone defined by relationship to someone defined by vision and resilience. Later that night, after the successful opening, I stood on the balcony of my loft, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights mirrored the stars above a beautiful symmetry that reminded me of my mother's favorite saying, "When one door closes, don't waste time staring at it. Look for the window that's just opened." She had been right, as she often was. The end of my marriage had not been the end of my story, merely the closing of a chapter that had served its purpose in the larger narrative of my life. I thought of all the women who might be receiving their own version of that text message tonight. The sudden betrayal, the calculated cruelty, the momentary feeling of the world collapsing. If I could tell them anything, it would be this: respond with your own okay, and then get to work. Use the underestimation of others as your secret weapon. Build something they never imagined you capable of creating. The greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. It's living so fully that the person who tried to diminish you becomes irrelevant to your story. That was what I had done, what I continued to do each day. And that, more than any settlement or vindication, was the true victory. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What gave you the strength to move forward? Your experiences might help someone else who's just received their own version of that devastating text message. Please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and reinvention. Like this video if it gave you a new perspective on responding to life's unexpected challenges, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength right now. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to someone trying to break you is simply, okay, followed by creating a life they never imagined possible for you. Until next time, this is Gabrielle wishing you the courage to write your own next chapter.